So, folks, many of you may have heard of this guy, Tucker Carlson. And he used to be a guy who people thought was like a news guy on Fox, and then argued in court that actually no serious person would ever take what he says as true, because it's all just for entertainment. And then, one of his lead writers got revealed as being like a virulent white nationalist. And then several years later, because he kept spreading election lies and was a huge legal liability and financial liability, Fox News fired him. And ever since then, Tucker Carlson has just been kind of making his content on YouTube and Twitter. It's very weird. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, but like he has a big enough following where this works for him, And I just really want to point out that there is absolutely no daylight between what the kind of content that Tucker Carlson is now creating to, the view of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, depending on the episode. He's amassed about 4.5 million subscribers, and he's engaging in straight up neo-Nazi rhetoric. And what I mean by that is that he's had a string of guests on recently that are just blatantly white supremacists.
Too lesbian.
White supremacists. For example, about a week ago, he had on a man named Christopher Caldwell, whose seemingly major contribution to like the cultural milieu has been that he thinks the civil rights movement went too far, and that has led to the downfall of whiteness in Western civilization and soon will destroy the West itself. And I'm gonna spare you guys that because it's a bit dry and Nazi-y. But I thought we'd take a look here at a small snippet of the conversation Tucker Carlson had with Lee Strobel, where they talk about possession, miracles, visions, and encounters with angels and demons. Because part of why I want to talk about this is that it's actually really important, this shift in rhetoric that has embraced,
is Trump dead
pseudoscience.
Yet? Is he dead? Did he die yet?
No, sadly, midnight and all night. But one day, inshallah. But Lee Strobel, like the embrace of all of these things, the supernatural, it is a sign of the anti-empiricist wing of this kind of fascist rhetoric on the rise. It is deliberately that, right? And I find it really interesting. We made fun of Tucker Carlson a while back for doing like an hour-long special about how he fist fought a demon. But like part of it is like testing the waters of his audience, right? Like if he can get them to go along with that, he can get them to go along with even more insane horse shit. And especially if he decides to gussy it up as, more reasonable content, they're 100% going to go for it, as opposed to like the angel demon talk where like, I don't know, maybe 60 or 70% might go for it, while the rest sit around and are like, this is at least interesting and fun. Let's take a look. But before we do that, just want to give a shout out here. Freed Key has redeemed 100,000 channel points. Thank you for watching my show. There you go. That was just for Freed Key. None of the rest of you can have it. That is the reward of 100,000 points right there. Appreciate y'all. Is he still lurking in the shadows and wanting to run for president? I mean, as far as I can tell, Superjet guy.
Certainly not in the United States, but in fact there is. It's scientism. It's the worship of science.
So I hadn't watched more than like half a second of this because I just wanted to prep it to get it ready to play on stream. And I do have to say, I have never felt more validated in my entire goddamn life to talk about how like fascism is inherently anti-empirical or anti-empiricist. You know, it is against the very notion of understanding how the world works and understanding like the natural sciences. And immediately as I hit play, within 5 seconds, Tucker Carlson is talking about how like in the West, we've turned away from Jesus Christ, and now instead of worshiping Christ, we're worshiping the scientific method, and we're gonna call it scientism. It's a new religion, everybody. If you believe in physics, you're a moron. You're just a cultist. You get on a plane thinking the math is gonna work. You're in a cult, buddy. Never in my life have I been so quickly validated. Also, Tired and Trans, thank you for redeeming 100,000 channel points. That's for you and you only. I'm a devout follower of scientism, Jack. Would you like to talk our Lord and Savior, General Relativity? Ah, yes, General Relativity. The greatest force of destruction known to man. Okay, you joke, but I had these arguments when I was in a Catholic high school. No. Like, this has absolutely been a hallmark of, like, the Christian nationalist movement. But it hasn't been a hallmark of, like, Tucker Carlson's content. The fact that he is embracing this is an indicator of a more explicit turn to fascism.
It's the belief, and all of us learn this at a young age, that everything around us, everything we experience, can be measured by people in white coats. That's science. And if it can't be measured, it's not real.
No, it's we want to test. Okay, let's back up, folks. What is science? Anybody? What is science? Anyone in chat? Take a stab at it. The study of the natural world. That's great. The process of figuring shit out, that's also great. Yeah. Science is the application of something we call the scientific method. It is a method by which we are able to form a hypothesis about how something in the world works, and that hypothesis must be testable. And it must be testable not just by one person, but by other people. Right? It must be replicable. That test.
Are we really sure we want Trump to give his running mate a sudden promotion? I'm a little nervous about Vladimir Putin becoming 48. He may not have the sauce, but his sugar daddies are dangerous.
His sugar daddies are dangerous, but like they're also backing Trump. So like I feel like it's a lateral move in those terms. But also, I don't think we have to worry about that imminently. But thank you for the $5 dono.
The problem with this religion is that our life, our daily experience, contradicts it. Constantly, all of us are seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling things that can't be measured by science, but it doesn't make them.
We can test those experiences. Tucker. Like, yes, your experiences in your brain are your own. That's true. But we know how those processes work because of the scientific method, because of, making hypotheses and studying the natural processes and then seeing if our hypothesis is correct. Does he mean supernatural stuff? What he's saying is essentially that, you are a soul in flesh, and that your existence and experience as a soul is disconnected in some way from the material world, and thus you experience things that go beyond science, that cannot be empirically measured because you are experiencing the supernatural by merely existing. So he's basically like, you're a spiritual being, you experience the supernatural world, and despite you being a spiritual being, you have no way of actually testing the spiritual. That's basically what he's saying.
Any less real. These are, by definition, supernatural. Supernatural experiences are a feature of everyone's life. And if we're honest, we'll admit that. So what are they?
Again, that's a huge claim to make. I would love for him to attempt to substantiate it, but I'm guessing that this entire 2-hour-long show of his is just going to take that as a foundational premise.
Mean exactly? Well, Lee Strobel was a reporter. He worked for the Chicago Tribune and left and became a pastor. So he has religious faith, but also a grounding in empiricism, the desire to prove things.
You can't talk about how you're grounded in empiricism after saying science is malarkey. Like, I'm sorry, you just spent the opening salvo of your show talking about how the desire to test and prove is inherently flawed because the supernatural, like, transcends the testable. Fuck you.
He is the perfect person to
we're a minute in. You've already contradicted your foundational premise.
Write the book that he did about the supernatural. That would be dreams, mystical dreams, near-death experiences.
Those aren't empirical. God damn it.
Miracles, ghosts. We sat down with him to hear just how common these experiences are and what they mean.
Can we just real quick? I'm just gonna throw up the dictionary definition of empirical, okay? Based on, concerned with, or verifiable by observation or experience rather than theory or pure logic. That would be verifiable by other people. As in, someone else would be able to verify your experience. And when we're talking about fucking visions or dreams, that's not the case. God, I hate this man. I hate this man so much. I hate his dopey, like, down-home, cabin-in-the-woods aesthetic that is completely and utterly false and feigned. And, like, the hokey intro. Look at this. Dude, like, picks up a banana peel. Whoa! Whoa! There's no banana in here. Oh my god. Like, I hate him. I hate the artifice. Look at him looking hard at that blank paper.
Lee Strobel. So you've written a book. I don't do a lot of book interviews, but I couldn't resist this one. Seeing the Supernatural, Investigating Angels, Demons, Mystical Dreams, Near-Death Encounters, and Other Mysteries of the Unseen World.
Right.
I think a lot of us sense or know on some level, in fact, I think everybody knows on some level, that there is a world that science can't measure or quantify.
Yeah.
That there is... that there's stuff that we can't explain.
Yeah.
But that it's no less real for our inability to explain it. So let's go through the list.
Yeah. By the way, I was an atheist. I'm trained in journalism and law. And so I'm always looking for corroboration.
Yes.
I'm looking for evidence. I'm looking for facts. And so,
I'm gonna give you guys a bit of a spoiler here. This I'm a bit of a journalist. I'm always looking for corroboration. I'm looking for evidence. I'm looking for facts. Also, the name of this particular segment of the show is literally called Strobel's Encounter with an Angel. And I just have to say, if you have verifiable evidence of an encounter with an angel, I'm all ears. Let's find out, shall we?
You're right. I think there's an intuitive sense that most people have that there's something beyond what we can see, touch, or put in a test tube. 8 out of 10 Americans believe that. But how do we know? What is the evidence? And that's what I try to get into in the book. How can we be sure through corroborated evidence that indeed there are such things as miracles, as near-death experiences, as deathbed encounters, and
oh boy, I can't wait.
Mystical dreams and things like that.
Yeah, atheism is the leap of imagination.
It is. That's true.
It's hard to be an atheist.
It's very true.
I admire them in a way, though. Feel sorry for them. But anyway, okay. Angels.
Yeah.
I admire them, but I also feel sorry for them. Jesus Christ.
What's an angel?
Fascinating. Angels are created by God before humankind was created. They are spirit beings, so they're not omniscient like God is. They're not omnipresent like God.
We are 3 minutes into this. It took us 3 minutes to get to just like, okay, all right.
God is. They don't age because there's no physical body. They don't marry because there's no physical body. They're very intelligent, very smart, and they are, according to the Bible, they are to serve not only God but also His people. And what's interesting,
the Christian Bible, with the Hebrew Old Testament, makes references. Is there any culture in the world that doesn't believe in some form of angel?
Yes. Yes. There are many. I don't know, like the Hellenistic ones, they don't, like, I'm gonna just take that back, because what Tucker Carlson and what a lot of people in like the Christian church do, and I know because I grew up with this, right, is that they universalize. Right? So they are like, yes, all religions have angels. But the reality is, if you actually knew anything about that other religion, or like any of the individual examples that they might list, you'd be like, oh, actually, these beings are, in this religious framework, are completely different. They are of a different sort than like what we're talking about here. Like, I assume, like, for example, if we got into like old Irish religious customs and like the religious beliefs around the Fae, right? Like Tucker Carlson would be like, yes, those are angels, and it's just not that, Or like, the Tumpties, they're like angels. No, it's different. Sorry.
Pretty universal. Yeah, it is pretty universal.
Like every culture.
Yeah, just virtually every culture.
Yeah, the Inuit all the way to the Maya.
That's right. That's right.
Canaanites.
And what's interesting about the Christian interpretation of angels is that it says in the book of Hebrews in the Bible that...
exactly, Depraved Ambiance. Were you the chatter the other day who was talking about inappropriate syncretism? Because like that is exactly the phenomenon. That's kind of where I wanted to go with that. Because what Christianity, and specifically Christian nationalists and Christian fundamentalists do, is that they like appropriate and like impose. Like they take elements of other religions and then they impose what they believe the orthodox version of their religion is on the understanding of those other cultures and religions, right? Instead of seeking to actually understand them on their own terms, instead it is, you are actually just like us. You're just too dumb to know it yet. I don't see what's wrong with finding similarities between cultures. Arguing over direct definitions of theological concepts is pointless. Yeah, but the issue isn't finding similarities between cultures. The issue is what they do with this, and I know this because I grew up in this church, is that they take the similarities and say, this is evidence that you folks are too primitive to understand the real truth of Jesus Christ, and therefore, like, you must be incorporated into us. Your culture, all of those other things, they're not important. We're going to impose Christianity upon you. Does he believe this stuff? I don't think Tucker Carlson believes any of this stuff. I think he finds it useful to his purpose. And so, like, what ultimately, though, the entire purpose of incorporating this style of interacting with other religious beliefs is not to better understand them. It is to destroy them. It is to ultimately attempt to consolidate power around their Christian nationalist understanding of the world, right? Like, it is not a project to build up anything. It is engaging in a play of power in, like, the social realm. Kind of like how fascists seek to centralize power, like, materially and politically. They also seek to centralize that power religiously, right? It's part of how they do their myth building, in any of these kinds of fascist movements, right? You can look at, for example, Nazi esotericism, because that was basically taking bits and pieces from all kinds of different religions, patching it together to say, see, this is why the Third Reich is actually the epitome of global dominance and culture. This is why we must prevail, because we must see the Aryan race through to its rightful place as the rulers of humanity, right? That is the same type of project that Christian nationalism is currently trying to build. It's exactly why Tucker Carlson here is having like a virulent Christian nationalist onto his program and just completely credulously regurgitating these ideas. It's not to better understand these ideas, because there aren't more interesting questions. It is simply to fire hose content onto his followers and try to onboard and centralize more power. That's it.
We should anticipate the possibility that we would encounter an angel. In other words, it says sometimes when you're providing hospitality to someone, unbeknownst to you,
this type of thinking in particular in this context, from someone like Lee Strobel, is designed to drive a wedge between an individual who might have some religious beliefs or inclinations and the concept of using of science, and in that way it is designed to further other talking points from Tucker Carlson, whether it's climate change denial or conspiracies about the government. Because ultimately it's kind of like when we talk about flat Earth, right? There's that great Dan Olson video going over looking for flat Earth, right? And ultimately, part of the doubt that is being planted here is like doubt the institutions, doubt the very apparatuses of science that have delivered all of these great findings. And if you can say doubt the findings of NASA, well, that implies there's a larger conspiracy. And maybe that conspiracy is among academia. And so you need to prevent people from going to college and prevent them from being indoctrinated. Or maybe the conspiracy goes all the way up into all of NASA and by extension, the deep state in the government. Or maybe it's, I don't know, some kind of nebulous group of international financiers. Or perhaps a specific group of international, with an international agenda. All of this plays into a wider narrative. So, and Tucker Carlson is very, very, very much aware of that and has been engaged in building this project for like the past decade,
It's an angel. And so there's an anticipation that perhaps there could be angelic encounters. And so what I try to look at in the book are cases in which we have angelic encounters. People actually encounter an angel. I'll give you an example. There was a missionary named John G. Paton, P-A-T-O-N, from Scotland. And he went to an island in the South Pacific to be a Christian missionary. And he and his wife were living in a cottage there. And he's talking about Jesus. Well, the local tribespeople didn't quite like that. And so one day a mob of them came to burn down their house and kill him. So they...
Oh yeah, no, this guy's like a big time like evangelical Christian Zionist. Like he's a big believer in like, if the world returns the Jews to Israel, and like the Palestinians are wiped out, then we can finally start the end times. And Jesus will come again, and then the fiery inferno will sweep across the lands and kill all the non-believers. He's one of those guys, and he's famous enough. I think he got his start in the 80s. I think he did some of the initial reporting on the Ford Pinto. But he then went on to like... was he the guy who wrote like The Case for Christ? I can't remember, but like he's oh yeah, okay, he did write that book. I've read that book. by the way. And so, like, that book was, like, what launched him into, like, national attention within the Christian community. And dude has only gone more crazy from there. He has the ear of people like Peter Thiel. Like, he has quite a bit of influence.
See this mob forming, and he and his wife are in their house, and what can they do? They start to pray. It's like, God, protect us, help us. They're going to kill us. They're going to burn our house down. What do we do? And they prayed all night long. And by dawn, the mob began to dissipate. A year later, he led the head of that mob to faith in Jesus Christ. And they're having a conversation. And John said to him, by the way, do you remember that day when you all came to burn down our house and kill us? Why didn't you do it? And the man said, well, who are all those men you had there? He said, I don't know, men. It was just my wife and I. He said, no. Your house was surrounded by these muscular men in white garments with drawn swords. There's no way we could have hurt you that night.
Yes. This definitely happened.
Well, what's the explanation for that?
Good thing no one in that mob had a gun.
I think it could very well have been an angelic encounter, that God had sent angels to protect him. And there's multiple numbers of cases like that.
Well, give me another.
Well, I had an encounter myself when I was 12 years old. It was the only dream I remember as a child. It was more of a vision than a dream. An angel appeared to me and started extolling heaven, how beautiful and wonderful heaven is. And I looked at him kind of offhandedly and said, well, I'm going to go there someday. And he looked at me and said, how do you know? And I was shocked by that. What do you mean, how do I know? And I started to kind of stumble around to justify my goodness. I said, well, I obey my parents pretty much, and I get good grades in school, and my friends like me, and I'm trying to justify why I would get into heaven. And he looked at me and he said, that doesn't matter. And this chill went through my spine. How can this not matter? And
I'm a bit baffled by this, by the way, because I'm fairly sure that a core component of his story was that he converted at like the age of 30 or something. And prior to that, he had been an atheist. So I'm not sure where I guess in this version of his story, he an angel personally appeared to him, and that he was just like, that's a bunch of hooey. That's a bunch of hooey. I'm gonna be an atheist because I hate God. And then at 30, he was like, oh wait, that was an angel. It just kind of seems like he's full of shit on this one. Like, just if you know anything about him.
He said, someday you'll
he was getting good grades at 30.
Understand. And then disappeared. Well, I kind of wrote it off as being a bad pizza.
What? Yeah, we've all had that experience, haven't we, chat? Whomst among us hasn't had a piece of pizza at the age of 12 and had visions of a muscular man telling us that we're gonna go to hell? It's a very common experience for 12-year-olds, chat. May I have your source for Strobel's Zionism and Christian nationalism? Literally his entire career.
Ultimately became an atheist. But 16 years later, as an atheist, my wife brought me to a church. And I heard the gospel for the first time. That salvation, that the doors of heaven are not flung open based on how nice you are to your parents or how good grades you get in school. It's based on the grace of God. It's not something we earn. It's a free gift of God's grace. And I heard that message for the first time, and my mind flashed back to that dream, and I thought, wait a minute, that's what he was trying to tell me back then.
Had you thought a lot about that dream in the
and then I realized it wasn't just pizza after all. That it wasn't the power of the pie. It's the power of the cross.
It would come to me every once in a while. I think about it. I just suppress it. Well, it was a bad pizza, But then I thought there's two forms of corroboration there. Number one, that angel told me something when I was 12 years old that I did not already know, that salvation is by grace. And secondly, he made a prophecy, a prediction that someday I would understand, that came true 16 years later. I think that may have been an angelic encounter that I had. I can't prove it, but that corroboration tells me maybe it really was. So we see cases like this around the world. And it was
Okay, well, my evidence for him being a Christian nationalist is one, that he's on Tucker Carlson right now, and two, that he's best friends with Peter Thiel, someone who is financially backing the Christian nationalist movement. And three, literally his entire body of work is taught inside of like the Christian nationalist circles that I'm familiar with. So those are my three different points I would like to put out there.
more than 200 references of angels in the Bible. There's not
200.
Yeah. So lots of evidence that indeed this is part of God's creation.
Interesting. I've been to church. I don't know that I'm probably the wrong kind of church, but I don't know that I've ever heard anyone refer to an
It's
angel
so
in
funny you
church.
say that, because I was giving a talk the other day and I said, I've been a Christian now since November the 8th of 1981. I have never heard a sermon on the topic of angels. Ever.
Why?
I don't know. And I go, and so in this book, I delve into it and I learn some new things. For instance, do we have a guardian angel? Well, there's actually two passages in the Bible that suggest maybe we do have a guardian angel. In one passage, Jesus is talking to a group and there's some children there, and he said, do not despise these little ones, because their angels see the face of God every day in heaven. Well, who are their angels? And then secondly, Peter, when he escapes from prison, goes to a home where some Christians had gathered, and he knocks on the door. And the servant says, who's there? And he says, Peter. And she recognizes his voice, and she calls out to the other people and says, hey, Peter's here. Well, I said, can't be here. He's in prison. Peter can't be here. It must be his angel. So based on those two passages, there are Christians who believe that we have an angel assigned to us. In fact, I believe in the Orthodox Christian tradition, they believe an angel is assigned to you at the time you're baptized. I don't know. There are Christians who deny that, but it could be. But the other thing I learned in my investigation of angels, I thought, you know what? I don't think it's appropriate to pray to angels. I don't believe we're taught to do that. I think there's a slippery slope if you're...
Yeah, by the way, the reason he's making this point here is that, like, he is a Protestant, and you don't want to get too close to those Catholic practices, like praying to saints. Yeah, you wouldn't... angels are pretty buff guys, but you don't want to pray to them instead of God.
Pray to angels that it might slip into worship of angels, which would be blasphemous. But there's nothing wrong with praying to God about angels. Martin Luther in the Small Catechism has a prayer, an evening prayer that says, Lord, send your holy angels to protect me from the evil one. And so I never used to do this, but I now make part of my prayer that God would send angels to protect me and my family, my ministry, my grandchildren. And so I think that's totally appropriate to do.
Hate to brag, but we're pretty confident this show is the most vehemently pro-dog podcast you're ever going to see.
That's just a lie. I've seen far more pro-dog podcasts. This podcast doesn't even have a dog cam. I've seen a Hassan stream. I've seen Kaya before. That's right. I even know the name of Hassan's dog. I used to have a puppy cam too. And you know what? I think I'm way more pro-dog than Tucker Carlson. And I'd be willing to fight about it. Kaya is really cute. Yeah, no, like, again, when we're talking about, like, oh, hey, is Lee Strobel a Zionist? Is Tucker Carlson a pro-Gaza Zionist? What is he? The answer is it doesn't matter, right? Like, at least for Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson will have any opinion. It doesn't matter. He's doing it for the money, and he's doing it for the power, right? When it comes to Lee Strobel, like, he's ideologically committed to, like, Israel's existence in order, and views it as a fulfillment of end times prophecy. So, like, again, he's pretty solidly in that camp of, like, a Christian Zionist here in America.
We can take or leave some people, but dogs are non-negotiable.
Dogs are non-negotiable. Let's jump ahead to see what they have to say about demons.
What are demons?
Demons are fallen angels. The Bible is a little bit vague on this, but apparently what happened, there was a... kind
of funny, if I could just pause. This is my totally ignorant read of it.
Yeah.
But when...
Are you going to bring out what... Tucker, are you going to bring up when you fist fought a demon? You did an entire show about it.
the supernatural host, when all these supernatural beings are referred to in the Bible, there's almost a sense in which the writer is assuming the reader already knows all this.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't have a passage that says, by the way,
right, these things are real.
Yeah, let me explain all this to you.
Yes.
No, it doesn't do that, which is interesting. But
because the culture at the time was familiar with this, and there was
oh yeah, like depraved ambiance. Lee Strobel is maybe less virulently, like rabidly Zionist, but the fundamental ideology he pushes and how he's talked about Israel in the past makes it clear, like, he views it as a fulfillment of end time prophecy. Like, he's in favor of making that happen.
No debate that there was a supernatural.
It's sort of like the
world.
soul. I have a chapter in the book on the existence of the soul. And because a lot of scientists today will deny that the soul exists. The Bible doesn't say, by the way, you have a soul and let me define it for you. It presumes that we have a soul.
Scientists will deny.
Okay, how does the Bible making that presumption demonstrate the soul, though? Like, I want to show your work a little bit. Just because a book presupposes something. Like, I'm sorry, Harry Potter presupposes that magic exists. Does that mean it actually exists? No!
The soul exists.
So most of what the big health companies sell is loaded with sugar and fillers and synthetic junk.
And I would never buy something with any of that. I only drink cold, pure water. Tell me more about these demons.
He becomes Satan, and a certain percentage of the angels accompanied him in this fall. This happened before the fall of humankind in the Garden of Eden, so this predates that. We don't know how many angels accompany him, but there are a lot of angels. In Revelation chapter 5, there's a scene of Jesus on the throne being worshipped, and if you do the math, because it talks about it a little cryptically, it was 100 million angels worshiping him at that time.
That's actually not a lot of angels, though. Like, they don't have bodies, right? So, like, the age-old adage of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, it doesn't, like if the answer's, like, I don't know, 10, that 100 million actually isn't a lot at all. But also, there are billions of human beings, so I don't know. It's kind of like, I guess in this calculation, we outnumber the angels. Chat. We gotta beat their ass.
So there's a lot of angels, and a percentage of them fell with Lucifer. He became Satan, and angels became his minions, so to speak. Now, Satan is limited in his power. He's not omniscient like God is. He's not omnipresent like God.
Hey, just out of curiosity, what's the original term in what's the original term for Satan? Lee Strobel? Is it Hasatan? Is it actually not really in the Bible all that often? Is that actually like the word for essentially a lawyer? One of the things that really shook me on Christianity is just that, like, Satan isn't real, even in, like, Christian theology. Like, in mainstream Christian theology now, like, it's just commonly accepted that, like, Satan exists and is just like a little evil guy that makes you do mischief and steals your soul. But, like, that's not in the Bible. Like, that's a modern invention, relatively, Yes, the adversary, but in, like, the sense of, like, a courtroom adversary, right? And the main time Hasatan is mentioned in the Bible is in the book of Job, when, like, Hasatan is essentially advocating that, like, Job doesn't really have what it takes to be, like, God's number one squeeze, Yeah, in a way, like, again, to talk about syncretism, like, it a lot of scholars speculate that, like, the concept of Satan as we now understand it was taken from like Zoroastrianism. And I don't know, it's kind of shocking to go back and actually read the Bible, which I did after learning that and realizing, oh wait, that's insane. Like, so much of what people commonly understand about the Bible is kind of bullshit modern invention, or like mistranslations that gained a life of their own, or it's very it's very interesting, to say the least. But it also is one of those things that made me go, oh, this might not be 100% true.
God is. In other words, a guy was telling me, he said, there's probably never a time when you and Satan have both been in the same zip code. Because he's only in one place at a time. And so he's got
And as we all know, he's very slow. Have you ever seen the movie It Follows? Satan's like that. He follows you very slowly.
Things he's doing. He's probably never been in the same zip code you have, but his demons probably have been. And they carry out his will, which is to pull people away from God, to discourage people in finding God, and to drag as many people to hell with him as they can. Now, his existence, he's sort of on a leash by God at this point. His ultimate destination in the lake of fire is already predicted, so he has no future really, but he has influence, and he has certain powers. He and the demons are very intuitive. You'll think they know more than they know, and they go after people. I tell the story in my book about a very prominent psychiatrist named Richard Gallagher, educated Ivy League.
Yeah, it is worth pointing out exactly, Depraved Ambiance. Like, what he's talking about right now is very commonly accepted in Christian circles as like how it all works, but none of it is substantiated by the actual like biblical texts. It's all like added in, or it uses apocrypha, or like it's all he's kind of off the map right now.
University. I have a quote from the former.
Why do we tolerate religion? Because most people are religious on the planet. It's hard. It's not something that is easily gotten rid of. And also, there's probably a likelihood that a certain percentage of the population is always going to be religious. But like, religion is probably one of those things where like human beings tend towards manufacturing one in the absence of one. Just again, like pattern recognition gone awry kind of will do that to you.
Former president of the American Psychiatric Association, calling him highest integrity, totally trained and prominent in his field.
Yeah, it's also not inherently bad. I agree with you, Dragonfly. But basically every fundamentalist of any religion is pretty cooked.
Psychiatry, of course, he's a medical doctor because he's a psychiatrist, just extolling him as an individual and as a scientist, as a psychiatrist. And about 25 years ago, he had two cats. And they got along great. They slept together, they played together, everything was fine. Until one night, the cats started to attack each other viciously. I mean,
whoa, cats suddenly attacking each other? That would never happen in real life. That must have been a demon.
I mean, they're trying to kill each other. They're clawing each other. They're snarling each other. They're biting each other. It was unbelievable. And they pulled them apart and put them into separate rooms and thought, what in the world was that all about? At 9 a.m. the next day, the doorbell rings. And it was a preset appointment. A Catholic priest was bringing by a woman to be examined by Dr. Gallagher. She claimed that she was a high priestess of a satanic cult. And he wanted her to be examined. Was she demonically possessed? Was she just crazy? Or what is this all about? So at 9 a.m., the doorbell rings for his appointment. And Dr. Gallagher opens the door. And here's this woman who claims to be a high priestess of a satanic cult, who kind of looks up at him and sneers at him and says, "So, how'd you like those cats last night?" Ooh, yeah. There's something going on. And that took him on a journey where he...
Wow. So much facts and evidence being presented right now. Also, can we just take a moment here? Like, whomst among us could maybe figure out how someone whose entire job it is to discern spirits might, bend the truth a little bit in order to make his stories seem a little bit more zesty.
As a psychiatrist who understands what mental illness is and comes to understand what demon possession and demon oppression is like.
Yeah, a guy whose entire living is examining people for spirits finds people, who need his spiritual assistance rather than his psychiatric expertise. That's so strange. Wonder why.
He spends the next 25 years as kind of the go-to guy in the medical realm for exorcists of the Catholic faith.
Huh. So you're saying like he kind of made a career out of it. And I know that this is a terrible example because these guys would just be like, well, that's because it's real. But like, so do like your local psychics make a career out of like doing, seeing your future or predicting like what's gonna happen
As the
for
high
you.
priestess of a
Reading
satanic
your
cult,
astrology
we had nothing
chart.
to do with those cats. They were just pissy that night.
Nomi Sunrider, thank you for the $5 super chat. Is he a mega pastor? No, the dude was like a guy who just made bank off of dudes coming to him with like possession cases.
And has witnessed amazing things that he documents. And I quote him in the book, cases where we have a woman who, in front of
let's
8 eyewitnesses, levitates off a bed for 30 minutes.
Damn, that's crazy. So you can find a person who can levitate at will, and you somehow can't substantiate that in a lab? Like, I'm sorry, if she can levitate off of a bed in front of 8 witnesses, then she can certainly levitate off a bed in front of like a little science team. It kind of sounds like maybe he's full of shit. I'm getting that impression. Let's see here. Can Christians be possessed? Some casual anti-Semitism about Pharisees. Is Hollywood in general possessed? How do you protect yourself from demons? What is the Holy Spirit? What is a mystical dream? How to hear from God? The mystical dream phenomenon happening in the Middle East. So far we're like 30 minutes in. Here, let's take a look here. Let's do this segment and then we'll be done.
There are certain forms of what we refer to as mental illness, which is like a phrase invented by people pretty recently.
Again, this is the entire point. Like, doubt the sciences, doubt the scientific method, doubt all of it, because actually, mental illness is just demons, which is literally like the premise of so many horror movies that it's an overused trope at this point. And like, it's not, it's just trauma and like hormones.
And clearly there are forms of mental illness, I guess, whatever that is. But there are certain...
Yeah, if only there's a way of figuring out what mental illness was. And if only there was like some kind of like book that the medical community published like periodically to define what that is.
People who have visions that are very unpleasant.
Yes.
And that bear like almost a precise resemblance to the demonic possession described in the New Testament.
And they may be demonic. I don't know. I have to evaluate each one to try to determine.
Of course, these are broad brushes, but you do. Is it fair to?
Yeah. Most of them might be demon possessed. Who knows? I'd have to evaluate each one. No other way.
Conclude that maybe not everything the shrink tells you is mental illness.
Yeah.
They can never describe where it comes from or how to fix it. They have no idea.
Okay, so folks, psychologists and therapists actually can figure out where it comes from and can figure out the medical mechanisms of it. And in fact, we're talking about the study of one specific part of you, the goddamn brain. It's happening in here. You fools.
But whatever. They know nothing. to be clear. But is it fair to assume that maybe some of that is spiritual?
Yes, I think it can very well be. I would look at, all of the factors involved. Where we have the external corroboration, like people left with scratches on them or bruises that cannot be.
I would love for Tucker Carlson, again, he did an entire episode about fist fighting a demon. Bring it up.
Explained, where we have levitation, where we have people speaking in a language they don't know, spontaneously speaking Latin, things like that. Then that is the external corroboration to me that there's something demonic going on. It doesn't mean it couldn't be demonic. I'm just saying those are the cases I'm more comfortable in concluding that they're demonic when I've got that kind of external corroboration.
But speaking in languages you don't know is described as in the Acts of the Apostles as a manifestation of the Holy Spirit, of God indwelling.
That's right. There are other languages people speak, but not when they're spitting at clergy who are trying to exercise.
Oh, is that a sign?
Yeah, that could be a sign.
When you're cringing before a crucifix and you're trying to bite people. But what about glossolalia? What about speaking in tongues?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can end right there. Yeah, what about speaking in tongues? Tell me a little bit more about this tongue speech. More Christians like Miss Rachel and less Christians like these lunatics, please? Absolutely. Miss Rachel is a goddamn saint. They hear gibberish and assume it's a foreign language because they literally only know one language. Indeed. Oh, God. Anyway, this is all nonsense. But it's curated and intentional nonsense. And Tucker Carlson's smart. He knows what he's doing. He knows what kind of content he is rolling out. He knows what kind of guests he is having on. He knows the kinds of conversations he wants to have. He knows the messaging he wants to send. And he knows the type of audience he is trying to build and for what purpose. This is all an attempt to coordinate and this is still, like, again, I don't know that this man is going to try and run for president in 2028 on the Republican ticket or in 2032. But if I was a media person with that level of following and that level of prominence, and I had ambitions towards taking over a Christian nationalist movement in politics, which Tucker Carlson absolutely does, and I had no moral scruples or qualms, this is exactly the kind of shit I'd do. It's disturbing to see, especially because it's like a lot of stuff from like my childhood being regurgitated on like a much larger scale and on a much larger stage with much larger stakes. And it's a bit terrifying, not gonna lie. Anyway, segment done. Fascism's bad.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather around. Twitch and YouTube and Swishy streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, being flame more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat.